So I'd like to welcome everyone along to our breakout session today. We're going to be covering performance nutrition for sustainable and profitable farming. So if Jill's going to be the screen sharer today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mamie Sloan and I'm Harbro's dairy technical nutritionist. Just to tell you a bit of my background, I've been working for Harbro for just over a year now, and before that I've worked for a couple of other companies, including a nutrition company in the southwest of England, and my on-farm dairy experience comes from working at my uncle's dairy farm during holidays and from school till after university. And Jill will introduce herself now.
Hello, afternoon everybody. I am Jill Hunter, Harbro's beef and sheep nutritionist. I started with Harbro back in the spring of last year, having previously worked for both Quality Meat Scotland and then Keenan Alltech. So it's nice to see some old colleagues in the audience as well this afternoon. For those of you who don't know us, Harbro are a family-owned, family-run business based in the northeast of Scotland, and we were established in 1977. We've got 4 different production sites, but we trade across 20 countries, across the UK, across Europe, and slightly further afield than that as well. And we are one of the largest suppliers of on-farm minerals in the UK. We really strongly pride ourselves on innovation and quality, and everything that we do has got sustainability and customer performance and profitability at the core.
Today, we're going to be covering what we're trying to achieve and what improving efficiency actually means. This is a huge topic, so we'll then move on to focus on our approach to sustainable farming and finish with a question and answer session. And we'll have our company chairman, Stephen Kenyon, joining us for this part of the session today. If you have any questions throughout, please type them into the chat box and we'll try to answer all of these at the end. We'll probably leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions.
Excellent. So like any business, farmers have got goals. So it's our job as nutritionists, as feed advisors, to go on farm, to help set them, and really to implement them and make sure that they happen. Every livestock unit, animals are always a key focus. And if they're not healthy, they're not performing, then our enterprise isn't profitable. We know that there's ever increasing environmental pressures, which are in our interest to address. And due to tightening profit margins, production efficiencies are continually being driven to make sure that we remain profitable. There are, of course, especially this year, other pressures which we come underneath and that we're all aware of without mentioning the 2 big ones. I just wanted to draw your attention to a quote that was in the QMS Enterprise Costings last year. It's a really interesting comment that I just would like to recognise. It said that economic sustainability and environmental sustainability goes hand in hand. So we remember that. We remember that it's mutually beneficial for us as producers to ensure that our enterprises are as efficient and sustainable as possible. Of course, there's always factors that we can control, and there's other ones that we can't, that are completely out of our control. So there's no point in focusing on the things that we can't change, and we should put all of our effort into adapting and changing the ones that we can.
So at Harbro, we have a few key focus areas where we are the experts in driving on-farm efficiency. These focus areas have a real impact on sustainability, and we're going to focus on each of these today and examples of how each of them works on farm.
Right, so thinking about research and development, everything that we do is underpinned and backed up by science and innovation. Over the years, Harbro has invested a huge amount of money in finding the best products, the best solutions to problems, and really being at the leading edge of that. To that end, we currently have 2 full-time employees completely dedicated to research and development. So that's who's on your screen here. On the left-hand side, we have Caitlin Palmer, who's our research development coordinator, and we have Farron, who is completely dedicated to, Farron McLean, who's completely dedicated to research and development of Maximon. So how many trials do you think we as a feed company have ongoing just now? Great question to ask when you're getting absolutely no feedback. So maybe you think we've got 3 or possibly 10. Right now, Harbro has got 36 trials ongoing, 36. This really sets us apart, and it shows how invested that we are in the industry. Some of these are standalone trials, little on-farm trials, testimonials, things that we're doing on farm, and other ones are a much bigger scale where we're in collaboration with other industry partners. On top of that, we also have a tie-up with the Glasgow Vet School. So Glasgow Vet School are very heavily involved in our research and development and have input into all of our trials. Further to that, we also have a resident vet, Reg Jones, who is currently doing his European Masters to become a sheep expert as well. So what's new and exciting? Right now, on the ruminant side of things, we've just been trialling a really new exciting additive in finishing cattle, and the initial results showed that this additive improved average daily gain by 320 grams per head per day in the last 20 days of the finishing period. So really exciting, and looking forward to doing more with that as we go forward. We also, Harbro, have a big side of our business is in pig and poultry nutrition as well, and we also have research and development going on in that side. Those of you that are involved in pig and poultry will know that there's a lot of legislation changes coming down the line, and we're really determined to be ahead of this alongside our producers.
So that's a bit on research and development, and we're just moving on to utilising and processing homegrown cereals. So traditionally, grain would be sold and farmers would buy back their feed, but with an emphasis now on reducing food miles, we need to help farmers utilise their own homegrown feeds and also feeds which can be grown sustainably within the UK. It also allows farmers to be less vulnerable to changing markets, as we're seeing with the moment, especially with what's happened in the raw material market in the last month or so. We use analysis and precision rationing to ensure that we're buying in and supplementing what is actually required. And we have on-farm mobile processing and ration mixing services to promote utilisation of this feed. We've also recently invested in a new rationing programme, and it's the first of its kind in the UK. It's a dynamic model, and it focuses on how the ration is fed to the cow using the whole digestive system from rumen to large intestine. And we can use this to ration cows more accurately while balancing homegrown feed with purchased feeds to optimise production and cost.
One Harbro innovation which has completely revolutionised the way we ration ruminants is Maximon. So Maximon is our alkaline grain treatment. I'm just going to show you, it's a 3-minute video where I explain the benefits of feeding Maximon to your animals.
I'm Jill Hunter, I'm a nutritionist, and I'm going to explain the key features and benefits of feeding Maximon treated cereals to your animals. For the last 10 years, Maximon has revolutionised the way we ration ruminants. There are 4 key features which benefit the farmers which feed Maximon to their animals. Got improved grain protein, stabilised rumen pH, improved diet digestibility, and improved rumen performance. By increasing the protein of the grain, we reduce the requirement for buying in additional protein. In addition, the Maximon process adds ammonia as a source of non-protein nitrogen. This enhances microbial protein production. The constant challenge when feeding ruminants is how we keep pH optimum, as many feeds are acidic, like silage. Optimum pH for rumen function is just above 6. Maximon stabilises rumen pH, meaning that we maintain the optimal range for the rumen to work most efficiently. Maximon works by breaking down fibre structures, meaning we improve the availability of energy to the rumen microbes. This allows microbes to make best use of the energy and additional dietary protein we provided them. Additionally, because we've already created the ideal rumen conditions, microbes are more active, and therefore we see improved overall diet digestibility. With the optimal level and form of grain protein, stable rumen pH, and improved fibre breakdown, we have the ideal conditions for enhanced rumen function and subsequent performance. So what key benefits and results would we expect to see when we're feeding Maximon to our animals? First of all, because we've had improved rumen function, we'd expect to see an improvement in feed conversion ratio. This means that we're getting better performance from a similar amount of food. Equally, we'd expect to see improved digestibility of the diet, which means we're getting more out of the same. And we'd expect to see that stable rumen pH. That means that we have more time at the optimum pH of just above 6. Because we spent more time at a pH of 6, then we would expect to see fewer health issues. Because our rumen is more stable for a longer period of time, this means we've got less risk of acidosis. Acidosis is simply a buildup of acid in the rumen. Because there's a buildup of acid in the rumen, we end up killing off some of the microbes. Less microbes mean we're getting less out of the feed, and we end up with poorer animal performance. In addition to that, some of the acid can end up in the bloodstream and can result in issues like laminitis. Because we've reduced the risk of acidosis, this means that our animals are more content. If the animals are more content, we tend to see animals which are more settled, they lie down, they chew the cud, and we'd also see an improvement in dung consistency. As well as an improvement in overall animal health, we'd also expect to see an increase in our profitability. We expect fewer poor performing animals, so it's not about making the best better, it's about taking that bottom third and pulling them up, pulling your average up. We also expect to see an increase in daily life weight gain, which overall improves our efficiency on farm. If you want to utilise your homegrown cereals, improve rumen performance and health, and increase the overall profitability of your enterprise, Maxmon can help you do this.
So hopefully everyone could hear that okay. I certainly could. It was just the video was a bit clunky, but you could definitely hear Jill very clearly. So hopefully everyone heard that okay. So we've just heard Jill cover many of the benefits we get from using Maxmon with beef cattle, as you could see in that video, and these benefits are exactly the same for a dairy cow, with improved feed conversion and improving the health of the digestive system. So we use Maxmon treated grain widely throughout many dairy farms in both Scotland and the rest of the UK, as well as all over Europe. In dairy nutrition, for how you raise cows, there's always a balance between managing milk production and the health of the digestive system. So Maxmon allows increased cereals to be fed in the ration more safely compared to untreated or acid-treated grains. The slide shows one of the testimonials we've had, and the Baileys have been feeding Maxmon for a number of years now, and they've been able to increase the amount of cereal they feed in the TMR safely, and they're achieving an average milk production of over 38 litres with high solids on twice-a-day milking. I also recently carried out a master's project on feeding Maxmon to dairy cows, and I found that overall Maxmon significantly increased the production of butter, fat and protein when introduced into the ration. And when fed at high levels, above 5 kilos per head per day, we also saw a significant increase in milk production compared with the previous diet. So just moving on to meeting consumer demands. These are ever changing, and in times when social media has a dramatic and quick influence, producers have to be sharp and able to make changes swiftly. Demand for dairy has been impacted due to COVID, which has caused the closing of cafes, restaurants, fast food outlets and coffee shops. But this did come with a switch to more home cooking. So HDB found in a study they did in the summer that there was a reduction in those claiming to cut back their dairy intake from 17% to 11%. And those consuming more has increased from 5 to 12%. And out with COVID, an ongoing consumer concern is climate change and the environment. And there's no escaping the buzz around soya use in animal production. We have the option of sustainable soya sources, but we also need to be looking at adapting to livestock production without its use. It's our job as nutritionists to look at the animal's requirements, and cows do not have a requirement for soya. They have requirements for amino acids, which can be supplied by other protein sources, offering bypass proteins such as protected rapeseed meal. We've replaced soya this winter in our dairy compounds with use of other feeds such as rapeseed meal, protected rapeseed meal and distiller's dark grains.
When it comes to beef, one consumer demand we're all aware of is the tightening carcass specifications, and I think this was talked about in the QMS session earlier as well. What our job as nutritionists, as feed advisors, was to go onto farm and help producers to actually achieve that. How do we do that? So we've adapted nutrition plans, so we've changed diets to make sure that cattle steers finish at smaller carcass weights, which has been a challenge. But as you know, with any challenge comes good opportunity. And we're really taking the opportunity to help producers make up for the shortfall in income by increasing or maximising their output from the heifers. So using a slightly different nutritional plan, different diets, getting the timings different. So we maximise the carcass weights of heifers to make up for the shortfall and pulling those two into line. In any case, consumer demands aren't going away. If anything, they'll increase, and imagine there'll be more coming down the line. But if we want a fair price and a sustainable market going forward, we need to make sure we adapt and that we produce what consumers want to buy, and ultimately what they'll pay a premium for.
So just moving on from this into working in partnership with the complete supply chain. At Harbro, we try to work with all levels of the supply chain in order to ensure advice on farm is relevant, to guarantee customers are meeting their market demands. And we're committed to know the latest industry demands and requirements, and that we can then feed back this to our customers so that they have the most up-to-date and relevant advice.
So in order to meet these consumer demands, it's essential that the whole supply chain works together. We're in regular contact with different stakeholders, with retailers, with processors on a really regular basis. And one example where this really came together nicely was last year, where Harbro were involved in the creation of a new integrated beef supply chain scheme, which was led by Aldi, involved one of our existing customers and other supply chain partners. Harbro's part in this is to make nutrition plans, diets, all that sort of thing, supply the materials, so supplying feed onto farm, monitoring the performance, so we've set targets, making sure we're meeting them, and then producing KPI reports so that fact-based decisions can be made on farm and further down the supply chain. What this resulted in on farm is that the cattle are taking 1 week less to finish because we're in control, and the majority of the cattle hitting target market specifications. It's great for the farmer, who know what they're going to produce. It's great for the retailer, the processor, they know what they're going to get. It's great for the retailer thereafter. It takes that uncertainty out of the supply chain, and nobody has to worry about what they're getting at what stage. Everybody knows what they're getting, and it absolutely has to be a more sustainable way for us to work. All the Scotland buying team have shared some thoughts here about how Harbro contributed and continue to contribute positively into the Aldi supply chain, and the importance to them of having a supply chain partner like ourselves. Okay.
So on the dairy side, we've also been working with processors and retailers on research and development projects. And here we have one example, and we have Phil Scott from Miller talking about their vision for sustainability.
I'm Phil Scott from the Ag team at Muller Milk and Ingredients. As part of our commitment to sustainability, we're developing carbon reduction roadmaps, which will help us identify points in the supply chain where we can reduce emissions. Looking at the very beginning of the supply chain, we're working with Harbro to understand the impact feed can play, and a series of trials are currently underway investigating how, by introducing rumitec to the diet, emissions can be significantly cut without compromising production. Although these are not yet complete, we're currently producing some very encouraging results.
Sorry. Okay, so our beef and sheep director is always telling the whole team, tell me what you know, not what you think. And when you think about it, it's a really good thing to remember. So tell me what you know, not what you think. The examples that we've shown you, I'm sure you'll agree, only work where good key performance indicators have been set and are constantly measured, monitored and managed to make sure that we're achieving what we want to. It's also, and I really can't stress this enough, it's important that the data which is collected is of good quality, because quite often we find actually poor data is worse than no data at all. We have different tools for different species to allow us to tailor what we measure and make sure that we're relevant across all species and on each farm. Just to build on that, the KPIs that we do set, they can be farm specific, and we need to make sure that it's right for your farm. So for example, if you're milking 12,000 litre cows, which are inside all year round, you wouldn't want to be comparing yourself to an extensive grazing system, because that wouldn't, it's a very little benefit to compare that. One of the longest standing sets of tools that we have in Harbro is in the pig team. There are various tools which they have available to them, which are designed to calculate and therefore and then to forecast performance to allow farmers to make various decisions. Kate Moore here alongside Ian Lyle from Harbro is a big user of this benchmarking service. So after years of monitoring performance, what has been set up within Harbro is an index, which is called HIP on the slide here. This is the Harbro Index of Pig Performance. And the HIP index represents, it's a single figure made up of different criteria, but it's all physical efficiency which the producer can actually influence. So it takes into account things like growth rate, feed conversion, and mortality. It's all things that what you do day to day has an influence on that. It doesn't take into account things like margin per kilo, because in all honesty, can we really, how much of an influence do we have on raw material prices? How much of an influence do we have on meat prices? So if we index ourselves and compare ourselves against other producers on things which we can compare, we get a true representation of how we compare against others. So the farmers with the highest HIP score, Harbro Index of Pig Production, should always be profitable. So they're the ones with the best growth rates, the best feed conversion, the lowest mortality, that sort of thing. And the HIP score really is becoming an index which is used across the pig industry. And this is really a real goal for us in the ruminant side to get our benchmarking to that standard. In the beef and sheep team then, what we use is a slightly more simple tool. We use this tool called What If Beef. It's a really simple, quick, sitting around the kitchen table, showing our customers how a change to their diet is going to affect, first of all, animal performance, and then ultimately their bottom line. That's what we're here for. We're running a business, we're trying to make money. This example here shows what would happen if we swapped out intensive beef minerals for a Harbro mineral, which includes Rumitech. So you'll hear more about Rumitech later in the presentation as well. So on the left, we have the current diet, so feeding 100 grams of A intensive beef mineral. And on the right-hand side, we're proposing to take out that mineral and put in the Harbro mineral with Rumitech in it, still 100 grams. Doing that adds 4 pence per head per day onto the cost of feeding these finishing animals. But when we look at all the different figures, we reckon, or we know by having done trials and research and development, we know that feeding Rumitech increases killing out percentage. So in this example, all it's changed is we've increased killing out percentage by 1%. What that means is our animal, if we're selling them dead, these animals are going to leave us an extra £21. After we paid for our minerals, we're £21 a head better off if we feed Rumitech minerals to these finishing cattle.
So moving on to our dairy tools, we have Milk Monitor, which is our own tool for performance analysis, and this has been developed over a number of years. So we try to complete this with our customers whom we work with regularly, monthly or bi-monthly, for those who obviously find it a useful tool. And on the dairy side, on this particular monitor, we do take into account total feed cost per litre and herd margin over feed cost, because these are particular measures which do draw a dairy farmer's attention. And we can also look at peak yield and persistency of the herd through lactation, as well as feed efficiency through our rumen rate calculation. So rumen rate is our measure that we use in Milk Monitor for efficiency. And it measures kilograms of energy corrected milk produced from kilograms of dry matter intake. So the more kilograms of milk you can produce from a kilo of dry matter, then the more efficient your animals are. And we know that this is a key performance indicator which drives economic efficiencies on farm. And this is demonstrated by this data which was taken from various entries on Milk Monitor. And it shows that as rumen rate of the cow increases, the margin per cow per day increases. And that may sound obvious, but each of these entries will have different feed costs attributed to them. But you can see that efficiency is still the key driver of an increase in margin. And then moving on, we also have our calf monitor. So this is aimed at calving heifers at 2 years old. We use this monitor for pre-weaning calves to make sure they're on the right track. And we have customers who weigh calves and send us the information, or we can also go out onto farm and weigh the calves for the farmers. We calculate their individual daily live weight gain and feedback their performance. And we aim to get two to three weights of these calves pre-weaning to measure if they're making target weaning weights. And this will stand them in good stead and make a good start to life to start achieving calving at 22 to 24 months. And this is our target because it has been found that calving heifers at this age has been shown to improve production and longevity of individual animals, and that's going to have a direct impact on the profitability and sustainability of your business. And finally, just one more tool to touch on is our Interheard program, which we get from NMR. And we can import milk recording data from CIS and NMR into this and analyze this information over time for individual farms. So we use this with customers, and we can look at many different things on farm, including performance KPIs compared to 500 other herds across the UK. We also can look at the digestive health of cows through a milk fat and protein monitor. We can look at a feed monitor graph to analyse energy status of the herd. And then we also have lots of health and fertility parameters such as somatic cell count trends, looking at the dry cow period performance or preg rate trends as well, just to name a few. So we know that if you're hitting the top 25% in your KPIs, you'll be amongst the most profitable and sustainable farms. And we're looking at carbon efficiency a lot more, and we know that these farms have some of the best profitability. Thanks, Jill.
Okay, so now thinking about sourcing environmentally sustainable raw materials. For the last 30 years, since Harbro was established, they've made the conscious decision never to use palm kernel in any feed. You will not find it on a Harbro label. Two reasons for this. Number one, and it was number one from day one, it's nutritionally poor, okay? The second of all is, of course, because we're ever increasingly aware of its detrimental environmental impact. So no palm kernel ever. By not including palm kernel in our diets and other nutritionally poor ingredients that we don't include, and we ensure that our feeds, our compounded feeds, our blends are high quality, they're energy dense, and that means that we're getting results. So we get performance on farm, and because we get good performance, we increase efficiency, and that means that we lower our cost per kilo gain. So we're producing beef, we want as low a cost per kilo beef gained as possible, and if we're milking cows, then we want the lowest cost per litre as possible as well. And I really would urge you to keep this in mind when you're comparing different, for example, compounded feeds. Please make sure you're comparing like for like. If you're not sure, ask, and we can talk through that. Make sure that you're getting your best value for money, and take into account your cost per kilo gain, your cost per litre of milk, because ultimately that's what makes you profitable and sustainable going forward. Cheaper per tonne isn't going to drive animal performance, and you could actually be getting false economy. And you heard earlier that Mamie mentioned about consumer demands are changing, and there's increasing demand for supply chains to become soya-free. So we source and use sustainable soya, but we also have options for all classes of beef, sheep and dairy which are soya-free. And again, as Mamie talked about earlier, animals, cattle, sheep, don't actually have a requirement for soya, they have a requirement for nutrients. So we think a great example in beef and sheep when we often use soya is pre-lambing, pre-calving to increase colostrum quality. It's not soya that's doing that, it's bypass protein. And there's plenty of other environmentally and sustainable ingredients which are just as cost effective, which we can use at that point. So cows and ewes, before calving and lambing, they don't need soya, they need bypass protein. Okay, so then thinking about reducing methane emissions. So once we've considered the carbon footprint of our ingredients, we've sourced them all sustainably and we've decided what we want to use, we then need to consider the carbon footprint of our entire enterprise. Methane is the main greenhouse gas which is produced from agriculture, and we know that ruminants are the biggest producers of methane. The question is, how do we fix this in a way which gives us a big tick for the environment, but is also beneficial to us as producers? So what we do is we improve efficiency. So we improve our performance efficiency. That means that we need less animals to produce the same amount of food, milk, beef, whatever it is we're producing. If we've got less animals, that means we reduce our maintenance requirements. So therefore, overall, we're reducing the amount of methane produced for producing the same amount of feed. If we want to be sustainable, we have to, first of all, improve efficiency, reduce our carbon footprint, and then we can think about the next steps.
So the next step, Jill would be alluding to, once we've done everything in our power to increase efficiency on farm, we need to maybe consider additives which can modify rumen microbes and result in less methane. So one such additive would be Rumitech, and we have a video here, so hopefully you can all hear it properly and Jill can play it.
Is your farm under pressure to reduce its carbon hoofprint and stay profitable? There's a good reason why. Agriculture is responsible for almost 1/10 of human greenhouse gas emissions, and almost half of that comes from cattle alone. It's a global problem that requires local solutions. Rumitech is a feed additive that is shown to significantly reduce emissions and improve feed efficiency in dairy and beef cattle without affecting productivity. By reducing the amount of methane produced, Rumitech makes fermentation in the cow's rumen more efficient, making more energy available to the cow to make it more productive. Assured by the Carbon Trust, when fed correctly within a predominantly forage-based diet, Rumitech has been shown to reduce dairy and beef enteric methane emissions by around 6% per animal per day, and dairy enteric methane emissions by around 18% per litre of milk. These efficiencies could reduce the cost of running a herd of dairy cows by £24,000 per year. At just 4p per cow per day for dairy, or 2p per cow per day for beef cattle, Rumitech is simple to introduce with minimal costs. And there are also many secondary benefits to feeding Rumitech, such as improved grading and killing out percentages, improved fertility, reduction in feed intake, and reduction in cases of ketosis. Rumitech reduces emissions and increases productivity.
Thanks, Jill. So Rumitech has 3 unique features compared to other additives which also reduce methane. So the first very important one is that the Carbon Trust has recently heightened its standards, and as far as we know, we're the only additive that has been reapproved to meet this standard. We've also just heard in that video that it improves performance. And thirdly, Rumitech alters the microbe population, but the rumen doesn't then adapt to this change, and so its effect continues to last while it's being fed. With other additives, the rumen can adapt and the effect can be lost. Rumitech and Maximon are both recognised by carbon assessment auditors, and they will improve your carbon score if you're feeding these to livestock. And finally, it is worth noting that in January 2020, the Committee on Climate Change published a report on land use policies for a net zero UK. And within this, it set out a mandate for feed producers to make use of methane inhibiting feed additives in compound feeds by 2023. So this is coming, guys, and it's likely that mostly all policy from the UK and Scottish Government will be linked to improving efficiency and sustainability going forward, and payments will be based on this. So it's worth getting ahead of the game and taking advantage of mutually beneficial results for the environment and animal performance. So just to touch a wee bit on trials with Rumitech, as you've heard, we're currently carrying out trials on commercial farms throughout Scotland in partnership with processors. And just to give you a taste of this, we don't have results yet or anything like that, but here in the background we have Caitlin, our R&D coordinator, carrying out some methane detection as part of these trials. In previous trials that have fed Rumitech to dairy cattle, we found an improvement on conception rate. We've also found that there are less NEFAs produced due to the cow not milking off her back as much. And we get an increased dry matter intake with an increased milk production, but the kilogram of milk produced per kilogram of dry matter also increased. So this improves the feed conversion efficiency of the cows. Rumitech alters the micropopulation, as I've mentioned, and as a result, there is reduced methane production. And this is around 18% per litre of milk and 6% per cow per day.
Okay, so just to finish up, I wanted to share with you an example, a really good example of where all the things that we talked about has come together really well. Now we have some real fantastic customers. So just taking one here, Alan Mastin, based at Stonehaven, real fantastic fella, doing a fantastic job. Alan finishes just over 3,000 cattle, so 3,200 cattle finished in the last 12 months, up there alongside his son Stuart. The table here shows Alan's results for the cattle he's holding over the last 12 months, and at any one time there could be 600 of those at grass. So these figures are the good, the bad and the ugly, everything in together. So 3,200 cattle to average 1.54 kilos of average daily gain, fantastic. It's also worth mentioning, at this point that Alan is really keen at measuring his performance at grass, and how he does that is measures the kilos of live weight gain per hectare. And for this latest batch of cattle that went through, the 600 of them average 1,100 kilos of live weight gain per hectare, which is a real achievement, and just shows you how attention to detail brings everything together. Just a little bit more detail about Alan's setup. So the diet is really very simple. There's no specialized feeding equipment. It's just fed with a bucket. He feeds as much homegrown cereal and feed as possible, and then any sort of local byproducts that are available. So you see in this picture here that at that point they're feeding a lot of potatoes. So it's just making sure we get that diet balanced and to use whatever is available. Alan is phenomenal with figures and takes meticulous records. He could tell you his performance for the last, I don't know how many years, but certainly probably the last 5 off the top of his head. And I really want to emphasize how important attention to detail. So most things are right, and then it's just what's next. How do we get that a little bit more? What's the 1% more, 2% here? An extra 100 grams of live weight gain. It's not about so we're really into the minor details and the marginal gains by this stage. And Rumitech is part of that. And if you think about it, you wouldn't put performance fuel into a car that was falling to bits. So it's the same thing. It's easy to do the big things, but if you really want to get the most out of your cattle and get the sorts of results that we're getting here, then everything has to come together. It's not just one thing in particular. You've got to get everything coming together at one time. But since adding Rumitech to the diet, there's 2 main things which Alan has achieved, which benefits him, his profitability, his animals, and also further down the supply chain, because if we want to have a sustainable future, we've got to, the things that we do, we're still going to build our own business and make sure we're profitable and we're sustainable on our own farms. But if we want the industry to be sustainable as a whole, we've got to think about the wider supply chain and actually how what we're producing influences everything else around us. The main thing, one thing that Alan has done is reduce his carbon footprint. So has to do a regular carbon footprint anyway. Because we've introduced Rumitech, the animals eat slightly less. They're on farm a few days less than before because they perform better. So we're reaching the same carcass weights at a few days less. So that means that our carbon footprint per kilo of beef produced is reduced. Okay, we're getting points for that. As Mamie said earlier as well, feeding Rumitech gets you a big tick on your carbon audit. The second thing is the increased killing out percentages. When we feed Rumitech, we see an increase in the lean to fat ratio, which is laid down, so we see an increase in killing out percentages. And this has benefits throughout the supply chain, not just for Alan, the processor sees benefits, and then so does the retailer. The consumer doesn't want to eat a big fatty steak, they want to eat lean, so that's what we should be producing. Adding Rumitech to Alan's diet has taken what was already good and made it better. It's just ramped up performance, real turned up the dial.
So that is a brief overview of our initiatives that we're involved with at Harbro to help build a sustainable and profitable agricultural industry across Scotland and the rest of the UK.
Excellent. So just when you go away today, there's just a few things that I would really like you to think about. First of all, could you tell us what your current performance is on a farm and how much detail is there in that? Do you know what you're trying to produce? Think about that. Do you get the best bang for your buck when you buy feed and supplements? Are you asking for advice? Could your cattle and the rest of your supply chain benefit from feeding Rumitech? And do you share your success and your feelings with others? Really, make no mistake, we are going to be increasingly scrutinised as an industry, and it's key. I mean, in fact, we really have a responsibility as an industry to all improve together, to build a sustainable and profitable future together for the industry.
Great, so now we'd like to take any questions. So if you haven't done so already, please type a question into the chat box and we will try our best to answer them. I see that we've got a couple already. Also, for anyone who wants to ask their question privately, our emails are displayed there, so feel free to get in touch with us for questions, advice, or anything.
Okay, so just while you send us in some questions, just to make you aware that we have an introductory offer for minerals with Rumitech in them and Maximum cereals for any new customers. But get in touch with us before Friday if you want any more detail on that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see everybody again.
Yeah. So we've got a few questions. I think we'll start with Alex Perry's because he asked that early on. So Alex from SAC Consulting has asked, obviously there's been a real shift towards reducing carbon and methane emissions across all sectors in farming. Where do you see nutrition and rationing fitting into this? And I hope throughout the presentation we did answer some of that. And I guess before I pass on to both Jill and Steve, I would say it is a huge contribution to how we do that and the global warming potential of feeds that we're feeding and how well that's balanced within the rumen can all make a huge effect on the methane produced as well. So I don't know if Steve, you have anything to add on to that. I want to come in at this point.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I think the main thing over and above that, mainly which you guys have talked about, is animal efficiency. If we look at the range of efficiencies that we see, even on dairy farms, that has a massive effect on the carbon footprint of those animals and the products that they're producing. I think going forward, that will be one of the key drivers, along with where did the ingredients come from, and along with tools such as Rumitech to further reduce methane emissions.
Yeah. And we also have a question, what is it, which I think came in around the Rumitech time. So I don't know if you want to cover that, Jill, or Steve wants to take over that as well.
What was the question? What is Rumitech?
it? Which I think, you know, basically what is the product and how do we feed it?
Okay, so very simply, Rumitech is essential oils which change or adapt the rumen microbes. How do we feed it? We can feed it through powdered minerals. So we have a range of powdered minerals which are for beef, sheep and dairy. Or we can feed it, we also have a range of compounded feeds and blends which contain Rumitech in them as well. Certainly in the beef and sheep side of things, Rumitech is in our compounded feed as standard. We believe it's the way forward. It helps increase feed efficiency. So if we take, for example, lamb finishing feed, so our lamb feeder, we know that by using good quality ingredients, by having an energy dense feed and including Rumitech in it, we get a 4-to-1 feed conversion in our lamb finishing feed. So Rumitech as standard across our compounded feed.
How does that compare, Jill, to Poro quality diet? So what's the bad case scenario in lambs?
Yeah, great question. So we did a trial where we compared a standard lamb finishing feed, and at the very best, other lamb finishing feeds were doing a 5-to-1. So if you take that into comparison, if your lamb feeds 250 pounds a ton and you need 4 kilos of it to put on a kilo, or you need 5 kilos of it to put on a kilo of live weight gain, there's a huge cost saving. So don't be scared to work out feed conversion and make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck, making sure you're working out your cost per kilo gain, not just looking at the cost per ton of feed.
Great, and there's also a question from Emily Grant who asked, can those who are all on grass-based systems feed it easily at pasture? And yeah, I would answer yes to that. It can be fed through powdered minerals if you're feeding those to accompany the diet at grass, or any compound feed that's also going out to grass. If it's solely grass that they're on, Jill, how would you recommend that would be fed?
Oh, it's a good question, Emily. Because you want to guarantee that it's being fed and it's being taken, so you get the benefit out of it, it needs to be in a compounded feed or a powdered mineral. But that's not to say, so it doesn't need to be a huge volume. It can be just a little bit. I don't think that really answers the question, but that's where it's at just now. Yeah. But maybe Emily has some great ideas on how it can actually be done.
We also have what essential oils and where do they come from? And I'll bring Stephen at this because I don't want to say anything I'm not allowed.
Thanks, Mamie. Listen, there's actually a cocktail of essential oils in there, but I think one of the really important things and why we get such consistent effects on farm and in the university trials showing lowering methane emissions is the whole QC behind that, and making sure that they're very consistent, because essential oils are natural, but you can do QC on them with chromatographs and things, which is what goes on. But I mean, one of the oils in there is a product called eugenol, which comes from cloves, but there are a number of other ones, and it's the specific cocktail that makes it work. And one of the questions earlier was around methane. What it specifically is doing is knocking out some of the bugs that are called methanogenic bacteria. So they're the ones that produce methane. So reducing the numbers of those and basically reducing the amount of lost carbon. And if we keep that carbon in the rumen, then the rumen can work more efficiently.
I think that's all. Oh, yeah, we've got another question. How would this compare to Meninges and boluses? So I'll let you answer that one as well, Steve.
It's simply because of your age, Steve.
And then the Meninges boluses are new. It's just I can remember when it used to get put into feed as well. How does it compare? It's I guess it's similar. You know, it's in terms of the rumen efficiency effect. We have actually done some laboratory, not animal, but laboratory tests with in vitro, so artificial rumens, comparing the methane emission reducing effects of Rumitech with Meninges, and the Rumitech effects were greater. So from an environmental point of view, it's probably more beneficial. I would say from an efficiency point of view, similar. But I think in the dairy situation, if we work out the cost of Rumitech in the diet versus the cost of a Meninges bolus, then there's some significant financial advantages being on Rumitech.
And Neil has asked if they're feeding this in the USA or Australia that you know of.
Yes and yes. I've just sold some in first few tons gone over to Australia in the last few months, and it's been going into the US for probably about a year. And there's a move over there, as you know, happened here 2003 when products such as Meninges were removed from the food chain. There's a move in these other countries for the same sorts of things to happen. So we're picking up business on the back of that, which is good.
Great. And we have another question from Chris, who's asked, is their effect on ketosis and negative energy balance comparable to the boluses too? And I wouldn't be able to comment on comparing to the boluses, but certainly Rumitech does have an effect on mitigating ketosis. On trials that have previously been done, as I mentioned in the presentation, we do get less NEFAs produced, so there's less back fat being broke down, which, you know, we obviously see, NEFAs are an indication of ketosis. So yeah, we do see an effect, but I can comment on the comparability to the bolus. We don't seem to have any other questions at the moment. If you do have any burning questions, I'd get them in quickly before we all breathe a sigh of relief and leave. We will also probably be in our, we have a booth in the expo section, so if anyone does have any questions, they can come in there and ask them, or direct message us on the AgriScot platform, or just a reminder that our email addresses are just our names with a full stop in the middle of the first and second name at harbro.co.uk.
Yep. Excellent.
Okay, well,
thank you everybody for coming.
Questions. Thank you everyone for listening and taking time out of your day. It's obviously a shame we couldn't be at the actual event, but this has been a very good day. Great.
I'd just like, on behalf of everyone that's been listening, to thank the pair of you for your hard work putting all that together and presenting over the internet. It's not easy. Well done.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for joining us.